So
Really? So
yeah,
competition.
yeah, just that it's not, and it's not necessarily about winning, but it's just about being in the contest and trying to be, whoever you're up against, just trying to beat them or be better than them on that particular day. So just that whole feeling of being in a contest is something I really, really missed when I stopped playing competitive sport.
Okay. Okay. So what is it about that competition? What drives you?
Um, I don't actually know, to tell you the truth. It's like I remember it's probably mellowed a lot now, and I'm a lot
Right?
more. But I remember when I was a youngster, that competitive spirit and the drive to win was very high, and a lot of my cricket mates were always quite surprised at how competitive I was.
Why were they
And
surprised how competitive you are?
I think like when you play sport like that, you're always competitive, and you've always got that competitive streak in you. I
Oh,
think I think
absolutely.
if there's a scale of sort of not very competitive to white line fever, I was probably I wasn't at white line fever, but I was probably closer to that end of the scale than I was to the non-competitive end of the scale. So, mm,
So when you go sailing for pleasure. Do you enter competitions?
yeah. So the guy who owns the boat was looking to put a crew together to race. So he wanted to take part in the racing. So he and his wife bought the boat together,
Right?
thinking they would do the races together. His wife suffers from what we call proximity issues, which means if there's another boat within 300 meters, for her, that is way too close. So she just freaks out. And they didn't know that until they bought the boat themselves and started sailing in it and things like that. So she gets very, very um,
Anxious?
anxious, yeah, to the point of um, can't remember that, whatever the next point is after anxious. She gets very, very nervous and
Scared.
yeah, very scared
Scared.
about the boat being that close. But
But 300 meters, I mean, I suppose the boats are really big. So 300 meters wouldn't be that far apart, would it?
well,
Big
it's
boats.
no, well, let's see, our boat's what, 10 meters, so it's about 30, 33, 35 feet.
Yeah,
So it
right.
sleeps, it can comfortably sleep 8 people on it. So it's a reasonable size.
Right.
We regularly have between 4 and 6 crew when we're
Right.
sailing, but we can handle the boat with 2 if we need to.
Okay.
But it's a reasonable size boat. It's probably a bit crowded with 8 on it, but if you've got 4 or 6 people on it, that's probably a good number of people to have on that size boat. And he was looking for a crew for racing. And his wife just wasn't going to be able to make it. Though she's quite happy to go cruising, quite happy to go and do a social sail and be out on the water. But there's been days when we've been racing where we've gone round a mark, and I could have stood with 1 foot on our deck and 1 foot on the deck of the boat next to me as
Oh
we
no.
mark.
Oh no. But that
And
you get an adrenaline rush
yeah,
doing that.
absolutely.
You
Yeah,
know,
yep.
you could almost touch the boat next to you,
Mm,
thinking, yeah, you've got to get away from them. You've got to beat them. So
yep.
the adrenaline starts pumping
Yeah,
even more, so that you work a lot harder
yep.
to beat them.
Yeah. There was.
How how often is it that you get beaten, even though that adrenaline's pumping so hard?
Oh, we have our share of days. Sailing is like all sports in it. It's a good leveler in that you have enough good days to really enjoy it, and you enjoy the good days, but you have enough bad days to remind you to enjoy the good days. And on the good days, you go, why can't we do it like that every time?
It
And
just
then
doesn't happen
yeah,
though.
and sailing is one of those sports that escalates. As soon as something goes wrong, it sort of snowballs that way. So it can be one little thing, and all of a sudden you've got 2 or 3 or 4 things have gone wrong, and you've got a big problem very, very quickly. So
Okay. And when you and I'm going to come back to here now with insurance, and you've got this big boat, and you're sailing and you're racing. So there'd be insurances that are required for the equipment itself, but there'd be insurances required for every person on that boat. You'd have to have your first aid, your CPR, you'd have to
yeah,
have all those sorts of things in place before you even step onto that boat.
yeah, yeah, it's all very much the skipper's responsibility,
Right?
and the skipper has the final call about whether the boat races or doesn't race, or continues to race or withdraws from the race. That's the skipper's call.
Right.
So
And what sort of reasons would the skipper stop the race or stop you from racing?
If you have sick or injured crew,
Right.
if their boat's been damaged, if the weather changes, if your boat can be sound and your crew can be sound, and you can look at the weather and go, yeah, that's an awful lot worse than they forecast.
Mm.
We're not going to go through that. We're going to withdraw from the race, or we're going to park, or we're going to, you can stop and wait the weather out and then resume racing if you choose to do that. You can withdraw the race and motor back to port, or a safe port. But if you've got sick or injured crew, seasick.
That'd be me.
Yep. So, and it depends, like seasoned sailors, if they get sick, they can function even though they're seasick.
Really?
For people who are relatively new, they're amazing. They'll be working on something, and it's the looking down when the boat's pitching and tossing. It's the looking down that actually does you in. And even our skipper has been on boats. He's in his mid-50s. He's been on boats, on and around boats all his life. And something went wrong with the engine one day. He's taken the cover off the engine. He stuck his head in the engine, and he's tinkering away. And I remember looking at him going, gee, I'm glad that's not me with my head in that engine, because you've got all the diesel fumes coming out of the engine below the deck, the boat's pitching and rocking. I'm going, yep, that'd be the end of me. I'd be over the side quick as a flash if that was me.
Yeah.
And next thing you know, look out, gangway, out of the way. Here he is over the side.
Yeah.
He was sick, vomited over the side, coughs and splutters, takes a mouthful of water, spits that out, looks around and goes, gee, I hate that, and then goes back to work on the motor.
Oh. I couldn't do that. I've been seasick, and I tell you what, I can't move.
Yeah, some people like him, and some are completely incapacitated by it.
Oh, that's me. It just, it's the worst feeling, being seasick.
Yep.
Do you get seasick?
I have done. We did the longest race we've done is Brisbane to Gladstone, which we did in 2018.
How far's that?
It's 300 miles.
Right.
So everything in sailing is in miles rather than kilometres, in nautical miles. So so a nautical mile, I think, is about 1.8 kilometres.
Right. Okay. So how fast do you go when you get, when
you
really get? Well, how do you monitor the speed that you're going? Well, you go in knots, don't you?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So how fast do you actually go?
So for us in our boat, if we're travelling along pretty quickly, we're sitting in that 12 knots.
And how fast is that normal on the road?
So a knot is about 1.8 kilometres.
Right. Okay. So it's pretty fast.
Yeah. So if we're at 10 knots, we're doing about 18 kilometres an hour across the ground.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, but we've had the boat at 16 knots. When we're going with the wind and we're rolling up and down on waves. It's when you're rolling down a 4 or 5 metre wave. You're suddenly on a surfboard with a mast and sails. And you literally, even though your boat's 35 feet long, you literally surf down the back of the wave, and we can get up to 15 or 16 knots when we're doing that. So,
but don't you, when you're coming down the wave like this, and then all of a sudden you hit the bottom, doesn't the nose of the boat dive into the water and then sort of come up?
Does that more when you're going into the wave, so that when it really pounds and then you see the nose dip in under the water, that's usually when you're going into the wave or into the wind and the weather.
Right. But when you're going down? When
you're going with it, what happens is the wave tends to roll underneath the boat, so the wave will go faster than the boat. Right. But you get on it's like body surfing. If you've ever body surfed, it's exactly the same principle. It's just a bigger wave and a bigger boat. or a bigger body on the wave. So,
you can have all that. You can have all that. Have you ever been to sailed on the Sydney to Hobart?
No, I haven't. That's a whole new game. So
do you ever want to?
I don't think so. Well, it'd be one of those things. It'd be really nice to say I've done it, but I think having done the Brisbane to Gladstone, I found that a real challenge. That ocean racing is completely different from the normal racing we do, which is just around the bay, around Moreton Bay in Brisbane. So, Moreton Bay is protected by Moreton Island and the two Stradbroke Islands. So through that, so it's quite protected. It can still get choppy and rough and windy, but it's a very different feeling. The boat sort of bounces. It's a boom, 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 boom across the waves. Whereas when you get out in the ocean, it rolls, and it's a big. You just roll up and down on the waves, and the movement of the boat is completely different. So,
how much control do you have over the boat when you're out in the ocean and you're rolling?
Yeah. Yep.
You still do?
Yeah, absolutely. Like Mother Nature's always the boss, but
Yes.
you generally you can steer as long as the boat's functioning well and you haven't broken any gear. Generally, the boat will function. I can remember we went to Gladstone. I'm sitting on the deck at 3:00 in the morning, pitch black, and we're going north, and the waves are rolling east. So rather than going over the nose, they're coming under the side of the boat. So the boat's sort of rolling sideways rather than lengthways. And you've got that for 30 odd hours as you go to Gladstone. But it was.
And you came back on the boat?
Yeah. No, we flew home. We left the boat up there and flew home, and some of the crew went up and brought it back a couple of weeks later. So.
Oh God, I would have driven up the side.
No, but it's like it was an experience. So having done the Brisbane to Gladstone and had that experience in what is a comparatively small boat. So, we're talking 30, 35 footer. The big maxis are 100 feet long.
Yeah.
So, and their average speed is about 25 knots. So
that's pretty fast.
They're fairly built on when they get up and running. If they get on a spinnaker run and they're flying downwind, they'll get up over 30 knots. So they can hum along when they're really going. So and then to sail on a maxi, you've got to be pretty experienced. So I don't think I've got the knowledge or the skill or the experience to sail on a maxi. And I don't think I'd want to go to Hobart on anything that was much smaller than a maxi. So.
Yeah, well, the waters are pretty treacherous down there.
If you
the
got
east coast of Australia.
If you got a nice flat race and a quick race, I think I'd be happy to do that. But you never quite know what you've got, and you've got to sign on for the race about 6 months before you go. So you can't tell that far out what it's going to be like. And
there'd be a lot of training too. So what's the fitness level of anyone that competes in a race that big, from Brisbane to Gladstone? You'd have to be pretty fit.
Yeah, you'd be surprised how... So they generally work on a 3 hours on, 3 hours off shift. So our boat, I'm not going this year, but our boat's going to Gladstone. So it starts, assuming it still goes ahead with the lockdown. But they've got 6 crew, and they'll have 3 on deck at any one time, and they'll be 3 hours on, 3 hours off from the start of the race until whatever time they finish Saturday night, Sunday morning. So they'll be sort of 36 to 48 hours of 3 hours on, 3 hours off.
So that's how long it takes them to go from point A to point B.
Yeah, so there's a big boat, there's a big maxi a couple of big maxis in the race. So the race starts about 11 o'clock Friday morning, Good Friday morning.
Oh, okay.
And some of those boats get in the early hours of Saturday morning. Well, they whiz up the coast. They really
power along.
Yeah, we see them at the start line.
And you don't see them until you finish.
We see them all docked in as we come into dock in Gladstone. So, there they are. They got here. We don't see them after that.
And long before you even think about arriving.
Yeah. Well, they finished. I can't remember when. I forget the time frames now. I think it's something like 13, 15 hours, 18 hours, something like that is the race record.
Wow.
I forget exactly what it is, but it's less than 24 hours.
Wow.
And we did it in 44, I think.
Not bad going. That's pretty good.
44 and a half hours. I think we crossed the line about 7:30 on the Sunday morning. So we'd had 2 nights at sea.
Right. So, you can have your 2 nights at sea.
Yeah, we were quite happy to get off the boat at the end.
You can have your 2 nights at sea. You can have your sailing. What is it? What's the adrenaline like for you and the crew when you're in these races? Everyone's there. They know what's expected of them. What's it like for everyone? The camaraderie and everything like that would have to be in sync all the time, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it does. And the more you train together, the better you get at it. And it's like a football team or a cricket team or a doubles combination in tennis. The more they play together, the better they get. So you can't decide that you're going to go Brisbane to Gladstone and just jump on the boat and go and expect that it's going to work. if you have a crew that commit in January, right, we're going to do the Brisbane to Gladstone. We're going to do every pennant race from now until the end of March, so that we're prepared to go when we go at Easter. That boat will do fairly well. It's the boat that sort of comes together and goes, let's go to Gladstone a couple of weeks before, and the boat's ready, and they put a crew together and off they go. They're the ones that sometimes don't gel quite so well.
And how many pennants do you have to go in before Easter? How many pennants are there?
Yeah, there's a number of races. So our summer racing series is about every fortnight from early October through to the end of March.
All right, okay.
Have a bit of a break over Christmas, but it's roughly every fortnight.
Right.
And it gets a little bit closer. It gets to sort of more every week towards the end of March, just as they bring everything together. There is the race that's the Surf to City. So from the Gold Coast up around the top of outside Stradbroke, both Stradbroke Islands, starts just outside the Gold Coast Seaway.
Mm-hmm.
You go up the eastern side of the two Stradbroke Islands, you go around the top of Moreton Island, then navigate your way back in across Moreton Bay to the finish line at Shorncliffe. So that is roughly a 24-hour race. Sometimes if you get a quick race, you do it a bit quicker. If you get a long race, sometimes it's a bit later on the Sunday afternoon when boats finish. But so that's generally the qualifier, in that you have to have a night at sea, and that is out in the open water. So you have to have that night at sea.
Mm-hmm.
Qualify to do the Brisbane to Gladstone. And then they have what they call the Kingfisher Race Series, which is a series of 4 night races. So the race actually starts at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and you then it's about 5 or 6 hours of racing. So you can finish at sort of 9 or 10 o'clock. If it's a bit lighter in the winds and takes a bit longer, then it can be midnight or 3 a.m. before you finish those races. But it's all designed to get crews used to sailing
at different stages of the day and night.
Yeah. Because you don't, when you're racing to Gladstone, you don't pull up overnight. You keep racing. So the boat keeps moving all the time.
Right. I'm exhausted just thinking about it. It's like, but your fitness level would have to be quite high to maintain those 3-hour shifts, because would you be moving all the time, or would you be observing and watching? And
depends a little bit. So if you're on the helm, in the heavy weather on the helm, that's quite hard going, because one minute you're sort of pulling on the helm, next thing you're pushing on the helm, then you're pulling on the helm. So you're sort of, not fighting, but you're working on the helm the whole time. So that can be physically exhausting, but mentally, because you're concentrating and trying to hold the boat in a particular direction. So you set the course and try and sail the course, and you do your best to hold the boat at that course.
Okay.
But yeah,